Everyone, welcome. I was going to take just a few minutes here and cover some of the topics that have shown up in my space over the last number of months. And I'm going to review these topics, these conversational items, and then offer perspective or just some advice, just ways of using them in your own life. I believe that any spiritual practice to be deemed truly effective in some ways either changing you or helping you move forward. And so in that context, the three subjects that we're going to be talking about that I believe can help move you forward: negative entities or interdimensional beings, the vibrations that govern choice, and then finally the second coming of Christ. Okay, so here we go. There's a beautiful short story, French literature, and it was written ages ago. And in that literature, it says, the most beautiful trick the devil ever pulled was convincing man he didn't exist. Okay, the most beautiful trick the devil ever pulled was convincing man he didn't exist. And why would that be the most beautiful trick? Because negative entities or demonic forces, Satan, the devil, whatever you want to call this category of beings, they thrive as long as you don't believe that they're real. And sometimes you've got terrible brain fog, or you just don't feel like yourself. Sometimes you hear voices in extreme cases, and you're certain, at least you have never heard voices before, so you have reason to believe they're not your voice. Sometimes your electronics bizarrely go on the fritz, or they become incompatible. You may even get locked out of your bank account, or there's issues with using basic technology. These are all simple, non-conclusive, but simple indications that there may be some interference coming through. And that is usually for a series of different reasons. Sometimes it's just happenstance. They happen into your space and they leave as quickly as they've come. Other times you're inadvertently attracting them. And in the worst of cases, you've either called them in. So some people engage in seances or black magic, and they actively seek contact with interdimensional beings. And other times, unfortunately, your vibration is particularly low. You are in a period of incredible, say, fear or anger, or maybe you existed with tremendous greed. In general, the demonic forces adhere to or are described by the 7 deadly sins. Okay, so sloth, wrath, which is anger, gluttony. When we exhibit various qualities, and you can certainly look up the 7 deadly sins, we have an understanding of the attraction, that is, the laws of attraction bringing in these beings. And oftentimes when these beings arrive, they accentuate this vibration. So those that perhaps are particularly in love with money, that energy of greed ends up attracting a demonic force that absolutely loves money. Those that have issues with anger may attract a negative entity or demonic force that loves violence, especially images, and they are just obsessed with watching or engaging in violent acts. It is a synergistic compatibility that can develop. Sometimes the light of your being may attract them, and sometimes they're even sent to snub out your light, which is to say you're particularly of high vibration, and they've made their way into your space. Unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all. This subject matter goes on and on and on. What I will offer is that there's simple solutions and then there's more involved solutions. And I will also say that there is change coming in this space. So first, for the simple solutions, the best thing that you can do in the instance of feeling or believing that there is some type of negative entity or demonic force that is in your space, first off, don't send it love. Actually, don't send it anything. Don't engage it. And certainly don't descend into the vibration that it's thriving on, which is fear, anxiety, conflict. These negative entities are like a battery. And that battery has a finite lifespan. For them to recharge and to exist, to stay alive, they need a fuel source. And so your responsibility is not to give them that fuel source. And so the first bit of advice, as I said, is don't engage in low vibrational acts as a result of feeling or thinking that you have a possession, a demonic event. The second thing that I would say is you can start to call for help on your own, which is to invoke the various prayers or calls for these demons or negative entities to depart. And you can certainly find resources, whether at your local church or online, that may have the right expertise to help exercise particularly difficult or stuck energies. And the final thing that I'll share in this account is that the long-term solution is raising your vibration and actively expanding your auric body, which becomes your force field to protect you from further possession. Okay? There are some people that carry demonic possessions their entire life. These interdimensional beings, which means that they operate in a dimension different from the physical dimension that we find ourselves in. They will make their way into the mind of an individual and intertwine their being with the being of that human. They desire the fuel source and the human experience. They don't have a body. So they need you for that to happen. If your auric body is particularly weak because you have a lot of drugs and alcohol in your system, or perhaps you have engaged with regular use of pharmaceuticals, or perhaps you have otherwise just existed in a low vibrational state where you've been playing the victim, where you're full of judgment, where you carry a degree of anger, animosity, cruelty, insensitivity, self-absorption, and blah, 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 you have inadvertently oftentimes created a hospitable environment and a vulnerability within your auric body for them to enter. That's the name of the game. And so these are the various steps or ideas that you can take. The short term, the middle term, and eventually the long term, which is to connect with a higher being of a higher vibration and to continuously work on being of high vibration yourself so that your auric body and your own vibration raises to the point where these beings are no longer able to penetrate yourself, you. The last bit of comment on this subject is that the death space in which these beings operate in, these beings have been led into our planetary sphere. And so portals have been opened and these beings have made their way in. They have existed among humans for millennia. They've always been here. It's only more recently that we don't believe that they exist. But they've always been here. And anybody who's ever known someone who's been demonically possessed, been in a relationship with somebody who's possessed, or otherwise experienced it themselves will tell you they're very, very real. And the space that they operate in has been compressing. It's shrinking because the planet is moving to a higher vibrational state. And that death space that has been so hospitable for them to be cycling in and out of our physical body, it's closing. And so in the long term, this is great news. These interdimensional beings, right, beings that can move between dimensions, will no longer be able to enter into your body because they won't be here. And your body, if you properly ascend, your auric body will be stronger anyways. The downside is that in the meantime, they're growing more desperate. They see that their time is shortening. And as you can imagine, any creature that wishes to survive, it is driving into more and more people more and more aggressively. It's been going on for these last few years. It's been intensifying. If a being has a hold of you and you begin to raise your vibration, which is to overcome the thoughts and the feelings, the words and the actions, which are of a low vibrational nature so that you're not giving into it, and you fight like hell to get through it. And you might have to fight, and then you think you've won the battle, and you have to go back and fight again and keep fighting and fighting and fighting insofar as you're focused on the vibration that is your state of being at all times as best as you possibly can while calling for help and moving forward. You will literally burn them up in your own purity. And they'll dissolve away. And that becomes the journey. The ultimate spiritual journey is the arrival of a high vibrational being within the physical realm that is no longer vulnerable to the low vibrational tendencies around them, however they manifest. Second subject. Decisions based on vibration. Vibrations to govern decisions. So when you are presented with any choice, anything around you, and over these last few years, many people are presented with some pretty drastic choices. There are some choices that are ultimately forced upon you, and anything that's being forced upon you, you know, is probably not in your best interest. But the ones where you have even the smallest amount of control over it, and oftentimes we have a great deal of control. Arguably, you could say even if I was being put to death and there was a gun to my head, you could still say there's a degree of choice within all matters. But even the ones where it feels like, other than death, like you really just don't have a choice, those decisions still oftentimes give you awareness of what's right and what's wrong based on the vibration present. So for example, if somebody wants you to take something in or on your body, or in or on the body of your child, and they're coercing you or they're manipulating you, meaning there's a high degree of censorship, or perhaps there's some financial or material incentive, or perhaps they're threatening you with your job, or they're threatening you with your ability to travel, or they're threatening your child to be able to go to school. Right? If the lack of civil liberties, if the lack of your own independence, autonomy, and individuality, if you as an individual aren't being prioritized, but rather you are being sacrificed for the greater good, and that greater good requires a forced decision onto your own body, this is an indication of a very low vibrational environment. A very low vibrational environment. It is no different than a woman out on a date with a man who is constantly being suggestive and pushing himself up against her will. And maybe he's lavishing her with compliments. Maybe he's full of praise. Maybe he's manipulative in some of the things that he's saying. Maybe he has a reputation and somehow he's not letting you even speak to somebody who could say otherwise. There's massive amounts of control in the mix. No more should that woman engage in some type of sexual activity with this man than an individual in this day and age should participate in any activity where the vibration external from us is questionable or low. If it's not coming from a loving, compassionate, and understanding source, if it's not at least neutral or beyond, right? If there's restrictions, limitations, and coercion, even 2% of it, don't do it. Don't try to figure out necessarily, you can, but don't try to figure out necessarily whether or not you should do something based on the information that source is providing you. It will likely be manipulation. You're much better off instead considering the vibration that's present. And I will say that if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true. And if it doesn't feel right, you shouldn't do it. It is too hard to simply rely on the human mind to navigate these difficult times. The other side or piece to this puzzle is the internal vibration. And that is to say, what's coming up for you? And so if you happen to find yourself in a state of fear, if you happen to find yourself crippled in anxiety, if you have otherwise been struggling and suffering because of the bombardment of information, contradictions, whatever it may be, and you're just confused, you're better off doing nothing than making a choice that you may end up regretting later on when the fear subsides. So in that case, all you have to be aware of is what's your state of being in that moment. I kid you not, if there was a nuclear bomb that went off in my town and the messages rang out and said, everybody run for your life, we've got buses out front, we're going to drive you away from this nuclear bomb, and I was full of fear in that moment, I would literally lock myself in my home and wait for that fear to subside, then get on the buses. I would, because I don't want to make any choices that are rooted or with fear present, and I won't be able to navigate the circumstances that present themselves to me in the minutes, hours, days that follow if my predominant vibration is a low nature. And so before I make any choice, I always ask, what's coming up for me? What am I feeling in this moment? What's the vibration present? And if I can't figure it out, I ask the people around me, what vibration are you feeling from those circumstances, and how are you receiving me? Use your thoughts and your feelings, engage the vibration present with all choices, relationship, medications, travel even, career choices. It's your guiding light. The last subject to talk about here, the second coming of Christ. And so I don't know. This conversation comes up every so often in different conversations. And I hear, of course, well, there's a second coming, well, there's going to be the Antichrist. To be frank, when I heard this years ago, and I remember scripture had said that with the coming of the Messiah, the dead will rise from their grave and there will be peace on earth. And I thought, the dead will rise from their grave, like that's like another 20, 30 billion people or something. Why? That doesn't make sense. And then there will be peace on earth. I'm like, how could one man bring peace on, like, even if Christ returned and we knew him to be as glorious as he was, healing the sick and feeding the hungry, would the liberals and the conservatives all start to get along with each other? Would people just change their political views because there's one man doing amazing things and he's speaking of unity and love for all? I don't buy it. I just don't. I'm not being cynical. I just don't think it would change that much. And so along those lines, either the Christ comes and he's totally different from anything we imagine, or there's another twist to this question. And that's where my mind goes. So when I think about a planet where the vibration is moving higher and consciousness is expanding and our capacity to move behind the qualities of enslavement, which are enslavement of the mind as well as the realm in which we've incarnated, are breaking down. I think about the dead rising from the grave, not in a literal sense, but as if we'll be able to access past lives. We'll be able to see into the lives of ourselves or others from before. That's if we should desire it. And then as far as peace on earth, I don't believe that one man brings peace on earth, but I do believe that the awakened self, who is standing in truth, who is embodying pure love and caring for the needs of others, who is otherwise the Messiah born from within, which I call this metaphorically breaking the shackles that keep us otherwise enslaved. Right? That individual who is one of a billion who have awakened to this possibility, or the entire planet for that matter, that becomes the awakened state, and that becomes the Messiah. That it's not something outside of us that we have to wait for, or pray for, or give charity for, or repent for. But rather the Messiah is a notion for you. It's your awakened self. It's your high vibrational self. And that's why all three of these subjects, as bizarre as they may seem on the surface, they all have one central theme. It's your vibration. It's always what it comes down to. When I was young, they used to say, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And I understood that. And now when I'm a little bit older, I say, if the words emanating from your being are not of a high vibration, don't say them. Don't say them. Don't burden yourself with a low vibrational state. Set an intention that you desire to overcome it. Find communion with others who are on this path of growth and betterment, the embodiment of the best version of yourself. These times are wonderfully supportive for the Messiah to awaken within you, for the second coming, or if you're Jewish, the first coming, to be you. Not from an egotistical standpoint, but rather the embodiment of all the beautiful qualities that we knew spiritual leaders or the Christ to have been. Those are all available for you now. That's the idea. So everyone, as always, sending you much love and light. I hope the video is of value. We'll speak again soon.